All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. Not that one, but this one. So check it out. I got another banger for you guys. This one's going to be short. Hopefully you guys will still like it. It's not going to be as in-depth or as detailed, but hopefully it'll still be a good story nonetheless. So this short story is going to be about an incident that took place in 2014 in the LA County Jail. At the time, my source, who I'm not going to refer to as Rico, was housed in Module 3800 where this incident took place. He had picked up a gun case and would end up staying in the county jail for about a year fighting his case. He had just picked up a gun case and would end up staying in the jail fighting his case for close to a year. This wasn't the first time he had been in the LA County Jail either. In fact, he'd been through the jail on several different occasions and therefore he was well aware of what it was like to function with his people, meaning the rules, policies, functions, protocols, and reglas that all Sureños have to conform to. Due to the fact that Rico had been in and out of the county jail so many times, he was what one would refer to as being a frequent flyer. So when Rico landed in Module 3800, one of the first things he was subjected to was the clearance process. He knew other Sureños who were there from doing time in the past, and they knew that he was a solid dude, but protocol still mandated that he go through this process anyway. It wouldn't have mattered if he had just left that same module the week before. Checking paperwork and the screening process is something that's taken very serious. This ensures that the casa stays cleansed and free from anybody that tries to slip through the cracks, such as a defector, an informant, or somebody that's on bad standings. So after Rico gets cleared and situated in this module, one of the other Sureños gets at him and basically gives him a rundown of that housing area. Who's in there, what the program consists of, what phones, tables, and other real estate they consider theirs, and just some of the other things Rico would need to know in order to program in there. So besides getting familiar with his surroundings and the program in that module, one of Rico's personal priorities was to familiarize himself with leadership and who the llavero was in 3800. At the time, an individual named Bouncer from La Mirada Locals had that module. Now, whether or not you're the type of individual that gets involved in the day-to-day politics, or whether you're the type of individual that minds his own business and kind of just falls back in the cuts, getting to know those who are holding down positions is important and could be critical insofar as you maintaining some type of leverage. It's not about trying to earn brownie points or playing up to those in positions. It's all about forging relationships with those who might serve a purpose that could possibly benefit you later. To dumb it down in simple terms, if you're not in a leadership position yourself, it's always beneficial to you to have allies or to at least interact with those who are in leadership positions, opposed to someone who isolates himself and is practically unknown within that circle. This was something that Rico had learned early on doing time, and he understood the advantages. However, to his dismay, over the course of time, Rico had started to notice that Bouncer had a lot of the same type of negative characteristics that he had seen in others in the past that put him in the same category as being a tyrant. Things that started to turn him down. Instead of gravitating towards Bouncer because he was the type of leader that led by example, Rico found himself trying to avoid Bouncer and steer clear of him because of his antics. In Rico's words, Bouncer was a disciplinarian. He had a habit of breaking off all the Sureños in that module, hundreds and hundreds of burpees for the smallest of infractions. For trivial things, Rico said, when someone's out of pocket and they got it coming, that's one thing. But when it gets to the point where you're getting DP'd for petty shit, that's not cool. And this is true, because at that point, it's no longer a tool that helps propel some of the younger guys forward in the learning process. It now becomes a weapon that's used to punish these guys and discourage them. Rico said that Bouncer had everyone in that module walking on eggshells. Guys didn't even want to interact in there because they felt like Bouncer would DP him. They felt like if they were talking too loud, or if they were having too much fun, or if somebody broke character, that Bouncer was riding their bumpers. And that affects the morale. So he was basically killing the morale and the sense of unity. He said he even got DP'd by Bouncer one time for sounding off too loud during the routine's cadence and while trying to motivate everyone else. I don't know what Bouncer was expecting when these guys were busting down, but the rutina, this is a time when you try to build each other up and motivate each other to keep pushing, to push themselves to their limits. That's how you motivate each other and you feed off of each other's energy. But in Bouncer's world, he thought Rico was being too loud, so he DP'd him. So for the most part, Rico tried to avoid Bouncer by keeping a low profile and by not creating any waves for himself. He said, I did my time, I fought my case, and I just rolled with the punches the best way I could. So in an environment like 3800 where everything is open, this gives you the ability to see more and focus in on other patterns and routines. Things that you wouldn't necessarily see in a more closed and restricted environment. More specifically, you get a rhythm of the comings and goings. Who leaves the module, how long they're gone, where they're going, the frequency, etc., etc. You also get a good feel of everybody else's daily routine as well. The one thing that stands true about prison, and even county jails for that matter, is that the day-to-day routine rarely changes. We're already creatures of habit. We settle into routines and patterns because it's comfortable and it's familiar to us. Therefore, whenever there's a break in the monotony where something deviates from the norm, it's easy for us to identify with what those breaks are. So Rico paid close attention to his surroundings and watched everyone around him. All the daily routines, who left that module, why they left, who worked out, who didn't work out, and so on and so forth. He watched everyone, and this just became part of his own daily routine. Bouncer was somebody that Rico already had his eyes on just based on the fact that Bouncer was the one holding down that module. So over the course of time, while Rico was fighting his case, he started to notice something about Bouncer that made him suspicious. Bouncer was getting pulled out daily for attorney visits, and it just seemed excessive, especially based on the fact that Bouncer wasn't fighting a hot one or a serious case. The other thing that was happening at that time that had everyone on edge is that the feds had just unsealed a massive indictment against Big Hazard, and they had a lot of people cooperating. There were over 800 agents from a multitude of agencies that charged 38 members and associates of Big Hazard with a litany of crimes. And the main target in that investigation was a Mexican mafia member by the name of Cricket, Manuel Jackson from Big Hazard. Although massive and far-reaching, this indictment was another typical Mexican mafia indictment. They hit these guys with the RICO Act, Racketeer, Influence, Corrupt Organizations Act, which at that point, the feds had successfully used for 2 decades to go after prison-based gangs. This indictment alleged that Big Hazard terrorized the Ramona Gardens housing complex in Boyle Heights for 2 decades. It also focused on the graffiti habits of Big Hazard, indicating that law enforcement had seen a lot of threats made towards the African-American residents living in Ramona Gardens, which had included an escalation in tagging phrases such as "no blacks." Aside from several overt acts that they claimed took place inside the Ramona Gardens housing complex, they also charged them with the usual taxation schemes and a conspiracy that showed that they were working in collusion. But anytime you call yourself a taxing authority, what do you expect? You're always going to get the attention and draw the ire of the IRS. So despite the fact that all this was going on at that time, the other thing that made Rico suspicious besides Bouncer getting these excessive visits were some of the questions that Bouncer was asking himself. According to Rico, Bouncer would occasionally ask some uncharacteristic questions. The kind of questions that would leave you standing there scratching your head, asking yourself, why would he ask me something like that? In jail or prison or anywhere for that matter, there's just certain things that you just don't ask. And if you do, others are going to get suspicious or wonder what your motive is for asking about something like that, such as who was specifically involved in a crime, what role they played, who was the trigger man, who was there, and other things along those lines. On one occasion, when Bouncer posed one of these questions to Rico, Rico's response was to ask him directly, why would he ask something like that? Bouncer's response didn't do much to deflect any of the suspicion either. Bouncer would simply say, I'm asking these questions because I need to know everything that's going on in my module. I don't care how informed you feel like you need to be about the area that you're overseeing. or the sense of entitlement that you feel that you're privy to. There's just some things that you just don't ask, and everybody knows this. Rico said that at that point, he just kept a closer eye on Bouncer and paid closer attention to his movements. He said Bouncer wore these huge Coke bottle glasses, and that at times he would just be sitting there at the table buffing these glasses out, just shining his glasses. And I remember seeing this on a couple occasions, and that it just seemed kind of odd to him. He just sat there buffing these glasses out. Every time he would come around, he had those glasses and he would just stand there buffing them out. So fast forward a couple weeks later, Rico said that one of his neighbors, an individual named Wolfie from Quiet Village, by the name of Wolfie from Quiet Village asked him a question that kind of put everything in perspective and made him think about it. Wolfie said, "Hey, my boy, have you noticed that every time they put a new homie in the cell with Bouncer, that they end up either losing their case or something bad happens?" I mean, in all fairness to Bouncer, this was a broad blanket statement that was being made just based on the fact that these guys were losing trial. You can't really assume too much just based on that alone. But then again, on the flip side, with all the other things factored into it, such as the questions that he was asking, his excessive attorney visits, and all the excessive off-tier movement, this made it at least worth looking into. Wolfie was adamant about it, and he kept insisting to Rico to just keep watching Bouncer, to just keep paying attention to his movements and what happens to the homies when they cell up with them. But Rico, he had been around long enough to understand that you have to tread lightly when you're dealing with situations like this. More so when it came to someone who was in a position. Waging these types of allegations against someone could end up being fatal, especially if those allegations proved to be frivolous. Someone could end up getting hurt. But his gut convinced him that they were onto something, and he wasn't just willing to write it off either. Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So Rico just continued to watch. And sure enough, he took notice that not only were some of Bouncer's cellies getting slammed at trial, but some of them were also getting hit with new cold cases. So at one point, when they felt that they were really onto something, they knew that they had to bring this up to somebody. They needed to address it somewhere, because obviously there was something to their observations. So the very next time that they went out to the yard, or they had rec time, they approached some of the other sureños about it. From what Rico described, yard consisted of them going out to one of the jail's rooftops with several other different modules. And this is when they took their concerns to some of the other sureños. And of course, as to be expected, this was met with stern caution. The general sentiment was that they needed to be real careful about making bogus allegations about Bouncer due to the fact that he was working for the Pilis, or the Mexican Mafia. But the crazy thing about it is that nobody defended Bouncer on the basis of his character alone. Nobody spoke up for him. Their only concern was that he was working for the big homies. So later on that same day during yard, one of Rico's homeboys, a guy named Cuete from Huimas, who was also on the yard when all this was talked about, said he was going to bring this up with Soldier Boy from Young Crowd, who he believes at that time had the jail, along with Stoney from Eastside Longo. So according to Rico, Cuete and some of the other sureños that had been around and had a little bit more experience, they devised a plan and set a trap to possibly flush Bouncer out. And the plan was simple. They would get at the next guy that moved in with Bouncer, and they would tell him to fabricate a bogus story where he implicated himself in a shooting or some other type of serious crime. The next celly that Bouncer ended up getting was an individual by the name of Evil from Clanton. And this plan, they told Evil to run this bogus story by Bouncer to see if he'd take the bait and see if he'd get caught up in their trap. So Evil, he concocts a well laid out story about how he blasted some rival gang members and how he won a gunfight taking 7 dudes down with a dull butter knife. I'm lightweight joking about the butter knife, but Evil springs the trap by giving Bouncer all the details to this bogus story, and then they just wait. Sure enough, about a week later, Evil comes back from an attorney visit and strikes up a kite. The kite basically says that his lawyer was informed by the DA that they just got some new critical evidence on a new case that they just filed. And the case that they were talking about was the case that Evil had just told Bouncer about a few days prior. So the problem with that is that the factual evidence that the DA claimed that it had was all bogus and was concocted strictly on the fabricated story that Evil told Bouncer about. This was all the proof that Soldier Boy and Stoney needed. When they heard this, they were like, he's done. He's definitely informant. He's working with them. Go ahead and blast him. Get rid of him. He was caught dead bang. At that point, it's not even about giving him the benefit of the doubt. Why? This new case that the DA claimed that it had was all based on bogus facts that were embellished by evil. So there was no way possible or any explanation that would have made any sense as to how the DA would have came into possession of that same information. For Bouncer, it was game over. He was caught and there was nothing that he could say to refute it. So again, Soldier Boy and Stoney send word back to hit him by any means necessary. The first chance you get, take him down. Send 3 guys on him with bangers and get rid of him. So this is what they were gearing up to do. They were going to send a 3-man squad on him with bangers, and they were going to hit him the next time that they came out to program. But then out of nowhere, the deputies flipped the script. Out of nowhere, they stopped allowing Bouncer to come out and program with everyone else. This was obviously based on concerns for his safety. But where were they getting that information from? Was there somebody else that was telling? According to Rico, the deputies just kept saying that Bouncer might end up getting transferred to one of the medical dorms just based on the fact that he somehow just broke his glasses. Obviously, there was nothing that nobody could do to stop them from facilitating the move. But still, this didn't explain why they stopped allowing Bouncer to come out and program with everyone else. The next thing that happens is that one of the deputies comes into the module and makes a beeline for Bouncer's door. And he goes to Bouncer's door and he tells him that he has an attorney visit, but that he needs to wait until somebody gets there to escort him to that attorney visit. Rico said that this was highly unusual for them to do that, and that just based on the way that the deputies were acting, that this started to seem like this was some kind of secret squirrel assignment. So Bouncer, he ends up getting escorted to his attorney interview, and he stays gone for about an hour. When he returns, he comes back in with a brand new pair of Coke bottle glasses, but they still refuse to let him program. This is when Rico and some of the others decided to be proactive about it. They decided to approach the deputies and ask them why. When they asked one of the deputies why they weren't allowing Bouncer to come out, they were being tight-lipped about it. And they basically said that they were just following directives and that this was coming from the gang intel unit or the officers that worked for Operation Safe Jail. In the meantime, at this point, these guys are just waiting for the first opportunity they get to blast Bouncer. He still don't know what time it is. They're still treating him like everything's all good. Nobody knows if the doors are going to pop open or even if they're going to be given that opportunity. But they're just waiting to come out and get him the first chance that they get. So I don't know if it was the following day or several days later, but at some point during court movement, they came to module 3800 and they pulled out about half the sureños that were in that module for court. And during court movement, they also unexpectedly pulled out Bouncer for court as well. I kind of got the impression that this was sometime later because by then they were all advised by Stoney and Soldier Boy that there would be 2 hitters coming from the Wayside jail and that they would be taking care of Bouncer in the court lines before they even got on the bus. I don't see them getting that information that fast, so it obviously had to be sometime later. So Rico said that they ended up taking them all to court movement and that this whole process is a chaotic disaster and that it's straight pandemonium. He said that you literally have hundreds of inmates from all over the jail getting escorted to court and they're all going to different court tanks. And that once you get put in those tanks, that you're basically stuck there waiting for every inmate that's on that court calendar so that they can move you all together. So Rico said that he remembers getting split up, but that he remembers seeing the Wayside bus pull up, and that he remembers seeing a guy named Enemy from Rancho San Pedro and Ghost from 204th Street. He said that as soon as he seen these 2, he knew that these were the 2 that had the assignment. He said he could just tell by their body language. They both looked tensed up and they were constantly scanning the tanks as if they were looking for someone. So as Rico was watching the whole process of one inmate at a time stepping off the bus, getting their cuffs removed, and then getting corralled to an assigned court tank, he sees Bouncer being escorted to the same tank where Enemy and Ghost were being held. So the deputy opened the door, he lets Bouncer walk in, and then he closed and locked the door behind him. Almost simultaneously, he said he was watching Enemy and Ghost as they advanced towards Bouncer, and then the fight was on. But unfortunately for Bouncer, they did more than just beat bop him. So Rico said for a brief minute, he lost sight of Bouncer in the crowd. But then not even 2 minutes later, he heard something that sounded like someone gasping for air. So in Rico's words, he said that they went hard on Bouncer. Initially, it sounded like they went at him with bangers, hitting him in the head, face, and neck. But then at some point, they tried to choke him out or they tried to strangle him. Again, Rico said that all you could hear was somebody gasping for air. And then it was over that fast. About a minute later, the deputies, they hear the commotion, they respond, they go in there, they start cuffing everybody up, and they start clearing everybody out. And then from that point, that's when their investigation started. So fast forward about 2 weeks later, Ghost and Enemy both end up getting hit with attempted murder charges and a litany of other crimes. But according to Rico, this is where the DA comes in with a twist. The DA doesn't offer any plea bargains. All the DA kept saying is that this is a life case, that we're shooting for life, and there's nothing on the table. It's almost like they were taking this case personal or something. They weren't offering them nothing. But here's the reason why the DA was playing hardball and why they were trying to make an example out of both Enemy and Ghost. Come to find out, Bouncer was a federal informant and had been one for years. He wasn't even in the jail on a legitimate criminal case. He had been out of custody for years. He had been placed there for the specific purpose of gathering incriminating information about specific people that the DA was targeting. This is actually called a Perkins investigation, where they furnish a recording device to a confidential informant so that he can record conversations. And here's another small twist to this story. If you see somebody with Coke bottle glasses, you better be careful. The Coke bottle glasses that Bouncer wore was a recording device given to him by law enforcement for the purpose of this Perkins investigation. Rico indicated that this is the whole reason why they wouldn't allow Bouncer to program during the time when his glasses were broken, because his recording device was broken and they were waiting for him to get a new pair. In the end, Bouncer ended up getting a lot of people caught up. He had them incriminate themselves while he recorded the whole conversation, and he had a knack for doing it. A lot of the youngsters that didn't know better, that didn't know that they didn't have to answer questions like that, they didn't have to incriminate themselves to somebody that was in a position of authority, ended up incriminating themselves, and those were the ones that ended up getting caught up. On a closing note, there's still some valuable lessons to take away from a story like this, and I'm sure you guys can figure out what some of those lessons are. But one of the main things is obviously this: no matter who you think you might be dealing with in these types of environments, whether it's somebody in a leadership position or just another inmate in the jail, the one thing you never do on any level is to ever talk to anyone about the specifics or the details of your case. Whether it's bragging, boasting, or providing the details to someone who feels entitled because they hold a position, or even when seeking legal advice, it's just something that you never want to do. Also, sometimes when your spidey senses start tingling and you get a bad vibe from someone you encounter, listen to your gut, because there's probably a good reason for it. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. Again, this is another example of the short stories that I'm going to start putting out. So hopefully you guys still like this format. If you guys like this story, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this story, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. As this one goes out, I'm already working on the next one. And trust me, I need to get my numbers up, so I'm going to be working. I appreciate you guys for supporting the channel, and those of you who are always trying to encourage others to help the channel grow. Anyways, you guys enjoy your week. Keep pushing that positivity. This your boy B, and I'm gone.